All right, welcome back to Citizen Weekend. Let's head back to our discussion on life in isolation. Let me reintroduce my guest once more, Eva Mutua, who was in isolation for close to 40 days. And she explained a bit earlier on why it was so long. And Dr. Job Makoyo, who is currently in isolation. This is now his second stab at it. Eva, you explained that you were in South Africa for the lockdown. You took the evacuation flight back here to Kenya, got tested again as protocol called for. You found you were positive. So once you got that call from your doctor, were you given any guidelines, and I'm guessing from the Ministry of Health, on how to go about treating yourself? You were asymptomatic, but while you're at home, was there anything that you were given in terms of guidance?
Yes, Jackie was very hands-on, if I can say that. While I was in isolation, she used to check on me once a day. So on day 10, pre-testing, I did tell her that my ears were itching, and she told me that I needed to get an antihistamine for that. So post-diagnosis, she sent me immediately the 22-page home-based care protocol. She also told me that she has gotten in touch with NMS, so I really cannot leave, because I was of the opinion, especially after I had told a friend of mine who had a friend on the same flight that I had tested positive. He was like, you need to go to another lab. And I was like, I really can't leave. Already, I would say I'm on radar, NMS. So Jackie let me know that the county had been informed. I then got a phone call from the first caseworker, was from NMS, a lady called Alice. She called me just to check on me, I think for her to maybe gauge my state of mind, just to encourage me. Then she told me that I'd be receiving a call from the Ministry of Health, a young man called Sylvester, and then I got my caseworker from the sub-county, a Sister Rose. So I actually had 4 people that I used to check in with through the period of isolation. So you read through the document. I was prescribed the vitamin C, the zinc, which I was already taking from South Africa. I got in touch with a nutritionist who used to look after my late mom, and I told her that this is my situation. What can I do? So she added some other supplements, which I then was lucky enough to get my colleague from work to organize for me. And I got what I needed. I got the gloves so that I could keep my housekeeper safe as well.
Okay, so you had your personal physician and then 3 individuals from government who are monitoring you. Job, let me come to you. What was your case? Did you have anyone checking in on you from government?
Unfortunately, I was all alone. I think when I got my results from Nairobi Hospital, I did have a discussion with the nurse, basically discussions around my home environment so that I could make home-based care work out for me. And we did go through stuff like how to isolate, how to take care of the utensils, how to interact with my spouse. And after that, I think that was the only call that I got. I did, however, get a call towards the end of my isolation to just check on me and how I was progressing. But by then, most of the symptoms had resolved. I think just through my reading and everything else, I was able to manage my situation in the house.
So was that call from the hospital or from someone from the Ministry of Health?
Oh, the second call was somebody from Ministry of Health. Yes.
Okay.
The one, yes.
Okay, so you basically had to police yourself to make sure that you stayed indoors, because for that duration of time, no one else was ensuring that you kept with the guidelines.
Yes, nobody came to check on me, but once I received my results, we did agree with my wife for her to get tested, and fortunately she tested negative because I had exposed her, which was a really good thing, but then that also complicates the whole home isolation exercise. But then we did establish house rules, stuff like how do we ensure that I have I'm using separate utensils with her, no touching surfaces. If we have to communicate, we have to communicate through masks. What kind of activities will I be doing in the house? And of course, I isolated myself into the guest bedroom, which has its own washroom facility. So we did establish our own rules and guidelines in the house, but basically we were also referring to the Ministry of Health guidelines.
Okay. And Eva, your scenario is very different from Job's in that, well, you only really had your house help that was interacting with you during your time of isolation. No one else were you coming in contact with. So as you're managing that, what else were you doing? I'm sure, you were able to work remotely, work from home, and still be able to deliver on various things. But what was your routine like? Because you have to almost create a new temporary daily routine in this situation.
Okay, the first thing that I did when I got my results, first you have the silence. You go through, okay, what do I need to do? I needed to put my house in order. I needed to get a will done. So I did that on the Wednesday night. We had a lot of drama when my mother passed away, and I didn't want to leave my siblings with that burden. So that was the first thing I did. Secondly, I kept to the routine that I had prior, when I was on isolation. So I'd wake up at 7:30, I'd shower, I'd sit in my chair, laptop out, 11 a.m. every day without fail, I'd fall asleep for like an hour and a half. I just couldn't help myself. But I'd wake up, continue doing my work, and get that out of the way, have my lunch, go out, have my exercise as we had agreed with my doctor at 4:30. She used to check on me twice a day. I had a COVID monitoring team, my sisters, who I would send my temperature every day by 9 in the morning and by maybe 9 p.m. And after my walk and my bowl exercises, I'd shower, sleep, and tomorrow the day would start again.
I mean, it's interesting because the one thing that struck me from what you've just said is you put together a will. I mean, did you think it would get that bad?
I didn't want, after you've been through trauma before, you don't want to leave anything. In fact, my doctor was like, Asi, what's going on, Eva? I was like, because she thought maybe I had panicked. I was like, no, it's very, very important. I live alone. I don't have a child. I don't have a husband. So I'm very, now I'm reliant on close friends, on siblings. So they needed to know, first and foremost, where my bank cards are, where my medical cards are. And then, should I die, this is what needs to happen. And then I was like, actually, with COVID, we're not going to have the drama of meetings. We're not going to have the drama of she needs to be buried in a certain place. I needed that to be clear. And it's because of what we had experienced with my sisters when my mom passed away. And I think it's just important to make sure that things are in order. And then, I live in my boss's house, for instance. I don't want anybody coming to cause drama here. This is what you need to do. Should I die, make sure that we don't have any of that.
Right. And Job, this time often, because we are still trying to figure out what this virus is, the kind of damage that it can cause, it takes a toll on you mentally and psychologically as well, especially when you're having to shut yourself off from social interaction. For you, what has that been like?
I think the first thing that I asked myself is, why me? Since the beginning of the pandemic, I've been working from home from March, and the only interaction I have is possibly going out for shopping, going for a run in the morning. So I asked myself, why me? And at what point did I contact this? And up to now, I still don't know. But then I think I also had a lot of worry and fear, because I was thinking what is going to happen, because you can imagine, like, the Friday when I received my results is the same day that we had a death of a colleague, Dr. Doreen Lugaliki. She was actually in my undergrad class, and similarly one of my friends' brother was in ICU. So the reality was like, hey, death is inevitable. It can happen. And similarly to what Eva is saying, I actually wrote down a list of all the properties I have, my bank accounts, my SACCO, just trying to think if this happens, then my wife should be able to know what I own. But I haven't disclosed that to her yet because I think I'm doing well at the moment. But then also getting worried, like, how will my wife cope with this situation? We have so good plans in life, all these grand ideas. So that's what was going on through my head. At the same time, because I kept on having some lingering symptoms, like headache, fatigue, also wondering, am I out of the woods yet, or there's still worse to come? The other thing that I had that had a psychological toll on me. I was really interacting a lot with people on social media, but then again, in terms of disclosure, I was like, who should I tell? What should I tell them? What impact will me telling them my results have? Especially my neighbors. I live in an apartment, so if I disclose this to the neighbors, issues of stigma. So that is something that really had an effect on me psychologically at the moment.
And just to clarify, you have not left your home in the last, 19 days, 20 days?
Yeah, so I did the first 14 days isolation after the first test, then did my second test, which came out positive. And the discussions I had with somebody, the person who called me from ministry, was like, so what next? Am I going to do 14 days again? And she was like, just do 7 days, get tested again. But luckily for me, and in between waiting for the second results, I'd left the apartment outside to sunbask. But in between the 7 days, then you have this CDC, WHO guidelines that say you don't need to retest. When the second test comes out positive, it's just results of the remnants of the viral RNA. It doesn't really mean you're infectious. But we had different guidelines from the Ministry of Health. So luckily, earlier this week, we had the new guidelines that you don't need to retest, even if you retest positive. It's like, sort of you've been discharged from isolation. So I did venture out eventually.
It didn't concern you that you may still be shedding the disease and probably affect someone?
So I was referring a lot to the guidelines that exist from WHO, reading out around a lot. And the current guidelines say that if you are asymptomatic, and you've isolated yourself for 14 days, and then you have 3 additional days when you have no fever, no chest symptoms, without using drugs, you should basically discharge from isolation. And also through clarification from my pathologist lab friends. So there was a little bit of consolation. There was a lot of consolation that at this point, if I don't have symptoms, I'm not shedding any viable virus that can infect other people. However, still with venturing outside, I wouldn't venture outside without having a hand sanitizer and gloves with me.
Still a lot we're learning about this virus. Let me close with you, Eva, and to something that Job had mentioned, and that's stigma. You're back to work now.
Yes, I am.
How are you dealing with that, if at all?
You know what? I was open. I needed to get to the halfway mark before I knew that I was going to tell my story. So I put it on my Facebook page. Going back to work is a different ball game because you're thinking, okay, my boss, who is the chairman of the company, he knew. He'd been working with me while I was in South Africa. The CEO knew. The HR lady knew. A few of the directors knew. But then, you think, what if I meet the guy, on the factory floor? Am I going to hide it? And I must say it's been okay. Although there have been a few incidents where people, are not really comfortable with me, and I'm okay. I'm not going to keep quiet and hide behind having COVID. I didn't choose to get COVID. I got it en route home, either at the airport, on the aircraft, either airport. And I have isolated. I have done the right thing. I have been in isolation for 40 days. I have tested positive. But unless we speak up, unless we stand up, unless we stand out, people are going to be stigmatized, and we can't be afraid. We have to demystify this disease. People are still saying there's no COVID, even after having seen my story on Facebook, would say, I don't believe there's COVID. I was tagged on another thread by a lady who was like, Eva Mutua, come and see this. And I'm like, I don't understand how people think the government is fudging with numbers. So, whatever comes. I'm a warrior. I've faced worse. I deal with KPLC every end of the month if I can, we're all afraid of our bills, and I survive. I think that's the only way we're going to deal with stigma.
You mentioned something really important, and this is the last one, in terms of how insidious this virus is. You were negative when you left South Africa. Some point during travel, you contracted it. But just to speak to maybe the lessons you've learned on how careful you can be and yet still get it. Still get the virus. I think we really, really, really need to listen to what the government is saying. They're not doing these things to lock us in. We cannot be too careful. I had a mask. I had a visor. I removed my mask for 8 minutes on the aircraft to eat and drink water. I didn't go to the toilet from 6:30 a.m. in South Africa to 9 p.m. when I got to my house. It could be when I was paying for excess baggage, using the card machine. I don't remember touching anything, but I did leave my iPad in the pocket, and I was given it 20 minutes later. Did I sanitize? I'm not too sure. So unless we follow the guidelines in place, put in place in our workplaces, put in place by the government, put in place by WHO, we're not going to beat this. And what Motahi says every day, if we continue to treat this virus normally, it will treat us abnormally. Thank you so much, Eva and Joe, for your time and being open in sharing your experiences. Well, that does it for Citizen Weekend. Thank you for watching. I'm Victoria Rubediri. Our sign language interpreter this evening has been Njoki Shege.